everybody, and welcome. We appreciate everybody being here, joining us on this Sunday to delve further into this summer's multi-part Foothills Forum Rappahannock News series on the Rappahannock economy, as was written past, present, and more importantly, future. The Work in Progress Forum, as we are calling it today, is being held, of course, at Mountainside Physical Therapy. And we're going to mention the co-hosts and our partners with this in a moment, but I thought nobody better than Danny Williams of Mountainside to welcome us.
Well, I see mostly faces I know, just a few I don't know. So if you've never been to Mountainside, as I told John, if you haven't been to Mountainside, you're either too healthy or you're not healthy enough. So we can fix you either way. I just wanted to let you guys know, some of you, I guess most of you all know that I also purchased the building this year and the property behind it in an effort to kind of hold on to a piece of Rappahannock. I wanted somebody that cared about Rappahannock to have this piece of property. So it's been a big step for me, but I hope that it will be a great place for a continued community. We have lots of stuff going on. If you haven't been to the Hazel River Art and Antique Center recently, it's changed and growing and refreshed, and we're featuring different artists every month, and so I wanted to put that out there because I know there's a lot of artists even within this room. So Hans Gerhard has his art up around my place, and it's all for sale, but he's our featured artist this month, so stop by and check it out. It'll be open when we close this April. So y'all meander on over there, and I'm glad to have you guys here and accommodate you. I hope that we can do more of this if necessary. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting us today. And we'll mention very quickly, for those, since we're taping this, unable to make it today, if you're watching, there's going to be a second midweek so-called after hours, as Bud calls it, forum opportunity. It's scheduled for Thursday, September 13th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Headmaster's Pub in Sperryville. And everybody here is obviously welcome to come to that as well. And I'm sure the topics will be similar but also different at the same time. We have several co-sponsors and presenters here today on the panel. Dennis Brack, who is the publisher of the Rappahannock News in the front row here. If I didn't mention, I'm John McCaslin. I'm the editor of the News, and Dennis has done a superb job with his incredible background in presenting these series, and Bud will go into more of that. Teresa Wood is to my left here, the president of Businesses of Rappahannock. And anybody that follows the businesses and everything Teresa does, Jan Mackel, everybody, there's others here today involved, have done a tremendous job in the last year bringing a lot of exposure to Rappahannock County. I'll have a great story in the newspaper this coming Thursday on that, so please pick up a copy if you're not a subscriber. Mike Sands is over here. He's getting ready to work out, as you can see on the bench with Ag Chat. And his father-in-law, Bill Deedle's here as well. Happy to see him. Kenner Love is joining us on Teresa's left of the Virginia Cooperative Extension Office. If you've never been there, they're on the second floor of the Kramer building. Thank you, Kenner, for being here today. And finally, Bud Meyer, the Foothills Forum chairman. And Bud, I'm going to turn it over to you.
John, thanks. Gosh, what a nice crowd. It feels good, and I'm glad you're here. The way we're going to work this forum out today is a little different from the ones we've done before, and we're stealing from the ag conversation format that Mike and Molly Peterson and others put together back in January. We want more involvement from you guys. We're not. I know this looks daunting as hell, too many talking heads, but really this is going to be an engagement with you. We're going to break out into small groups. We're going to make you do a little bit of work, or at least exercise your brains in the breakout sessions. So we're looking forward to that. And each breakout session, each topic will sort of relate to one of the main topics of this four-part series. And, you know, it's being streamed here. We've already mentioned the September 13th event. We're going to ask each of the small breakout groups to kind of report back, and what we hope will emerge from this is more of a sense of where do we stand in this county with some of the topics that this ambitious 4-part series on the economy covered. And where do we go from here, and what are the resources needed, and who are the players who are going to be carrying it forward. So something a little more directive. We learned in the past forums that it wasn't enough for Foothills Forum reporters, researchers, these folks, I'll introduce them, to do their fine work. For Dennis and his people, John included, to design it in the newspaper so spectacularly and to publish it. It wasn't enough for us to have the forum and say, here's your topic, chew it over. We think the next step has to be ownership of the way forward. Who takes ownership of the way forward? Well, probably this crowd collectively. We've got all the right brains here. We've got mayors and heads of nonprofits and journalists. So that's the hope. Before we get started, I want to introduce some of the stars of the work that you read over the summer. Tim Carrington wrote the spectacular, in my estimation, part 1 of this series about our economic history. He's here today. He's my neighbor over on Tiger Valley. He's here today to talk about part 1 in the whole overall series. Randy Ryland, who has written so many of our series, Honcho parts 2, 3, and 4. He was helped in that by Sarah Schoenhardt, sitting here to my left. Sarah was our summer fellow, and she got a lot of mileage out of that title this summer, working at the news as a very hardworking, experienced journalist who added so much this summer to the enjoyment of the news and to our series. So we've got all 3 of these people ready to talk about it. I want to give a shout out to Teresa Wood and Businesses of Rappahannock, and here's why. We've reached out to other nonprofit and other organizations in our lifetime, but we started it. We reached out and said, hey, work with us. This time, Teresa reached out to us. She was a partner throughout. They did a survey at the beginning of this session of their membership on the issues that we were going to be tackling. She's been a great cooperative partner throughout, and as if she weren't busy enough, she and Jan and others have also put this spectacular event together next weekend. Good luck with that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I just want to publicly say, Businesses of Rappahannock, they're setting the high bar. We're looking forward in the future for future partners in efforts like this. That's it. I've introduced the team. Now it's their stage. And for the next few minutes, I'd like them to share some of their experiences as they did the research and reporting on the topic. Our agricultural and environmental history relates to work here in the county. New topics, or not so new topics, like agritourism, but not forgetting all the other people who work for a living in this wonderful place that we call Rappahannock County. So, Tim, you were part 1. Start us off. What's your takeaway from your work and reporting on this and what followed?
Well, it was a terrific opportunity and experience to talk with people about what became the subject of this history story, which was, yes, it was history, but it was also the fact that change is not a sudden invention, that change is something that has happened in every era, And what was to me so interesting about the reporting on this story was how many people were immensely resourceful and imaginative and persistent in responding to change. Change they may not have chosen, but change that arrived nonetheless. And I think that looking at every era where something significant shifted, where the state of Washington became an Apple superpower, where obviously the opening anecdote of that story was about the closing of the Eileen dress factory. Something that happened here in this county and had a lot of impact on a lot of people, but something that followed a much larger global pattern of what was happening with the production of clothing, apparel, textiles. It was all shifting away, and factories across the United States like this were closing. But the key thing that became the interesting question and the focus of this story was the way people addressed the question of what next. And that to me was the endlessly interesting story and focus of conversation. And I learned a great deal from people I talked with about that. I would say too that asking the question, what next, what do we do now, is not just a question that people ask when something has collapsed around them or when something isn't working at all and you've got to completely reinvent. It also is a question that continuing businesses asked, and I hope that maybe Lorraine Early can weigh in later in our discussion, but I remember in my discussion with her and her daughter and learning more about that business, which is featured in this story, is the sense of continuous learning from what's going on, learning about new approaches, new materials, new opportunities, new threats, and that just as a business that's been here for 50 years, that requires an enormous amount of learning. One short anecdote on the same thing happening with a younger business, which is the Virginia Chutney Company. They also came in talking about chutney, which a lot of people had never heard of, let alone eaten. One of the employees there said it was chutney something you wore. But they started off with the chutney, and then other people got them going with some other things like the pepper jelly and the Turkish fig jam. Well, that wasn't what they originally planned, but they started doing it and it worked. And so those things are actually selling more across Whole Foods, throughout the United States than the original chutneys, which are doing okay, but they learned something else. They started doing something they hadn't originally planned to do. So I think the bottom takeaway, the bottom line to me was, this is a community of businesses and individuals that are very good at responding to change. There's a huge amount of resourcefulness and a huge amount of openness to creatively addressing the question, what next? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Mr. Ryland.
Welcome, everyone. And first, I want to, again, thank people in this room who I interviewed and took a lot of their time. And I, as always, appreciate your generosity. And I know each of you has heard me say, I know this is a dumb question, but I know I've said before when I've been at these forums that I had the sense that people in this community generally all want the same thing. And after this series, I've kind of updated that or changed that some, made it a bit more nuanced, more from the standpoint of they want their own version of the same thing. That may sound like I'm parsing words, but essentially there's this idyllic vision of what Rappahannock is and was and hopefully can be, which is a wonderful thing to hold on to. And people here are to be commended for doing all they can to hold on to that. At the same time, though, it unfortunately allows people to sometimes not pay enough attention to some of the realities. There are demographic trends, that's a reality. Economic trends are a reality. Technological trends are a reality. As someone who was involved with the county for a long time told me, there was a period where businesses would come out here because they loved doing business here. They loved just setting up their own little place here. But then the internet became a requirement, and it made it much harder to get those types of businesses to move here. So that's a reality. I mean, that's one of those things. There was a progression in the business community, and then it really slowed down because it became necessary to have this kind of technological functionality to work. So I just thought, I think we all thought that it was important to try to raise some of those bigger issues, not to necessarily provide any answers because they're far too complex, but rather just to say, this is a time when there are these trends moving in a certain direction. They aren't all negative necessarily, but they're trends that need to be addressed in some way. So the question is, how do you address them? How do you deal with these things in such a way that it allows you to hold on to as much of what you love about the county? And it may very well be, you look at the comprehensive plan and say, this is great. This is going to work for posterity. And it may. But I think it's important, given the changes that are occurring, the trends that are occurring, to look at that through that filter and say, what might we need to do? It just seems like this is a very good time to start to have some of those conversations. I think one thing, and I'm greatly oversimplifying this, but I think there's been a tendency both within the agricultural community and in the business community for people to go their own way. And I completely understand that, because a lot of times people, when they move out here, that's why they moved here. Because I want to do my thing, I love this place, I want to go my own way. That may not be the best formula for success in the future. That there might need to be much more collaboration throughout the agricultural community, certainly in the business community, and you're seeing it now in businesses of Rappahannock with many of the things they're doing. That notion of I can do my own thing is just going to be hard to sustain going forward. And one last thing I want to say, for this particular piece, I talked to more people outside the county, in tourism offices and other government offices in neighboring counties, and I was struck, as I have been in the past, but more so this time, by the number of people who said to me they view Rappahannock as some sort of Xanadu, I mean, they're not quite sure what to make of it. And they'll ask me, what's going on over there? And like, I know. But I think part of it is with the desire to sustain this unique community, there's been a tendency just to say, we'll do our own thing. And again, in these times, is that formula for success? It's not to say you just throw everything out that's been wonderful about the county, but maybe it's important just to think a bit more regionally in some ways and see how that can benefit the county. And the idea ultimately is to say, how do we sustain the Rappahannock experiment, as people have put it to me, given all the trends that are occurring, and what can we do to help that along without giving up the things that we really value? But that really requires a more proactive stance as opposed to reactive. I think Rappahannock has long been a reactive place, like just keep it away. Don't come in here. It's like mosquitoes from outside. So anyway, I as always, I learned a lot, and there's certainly, it's not like we're providing answers, it's more like we're raising questions, and we know this is a community that wants to address those things because they value what's here so much. And so if we can help move some of these discussions forward, so people can use all the brain power in this room and elsewhere in the county and all the inventiveness, and find ways to make these the things that people value in the county, make them something that can be held on to, given how the world around us is changing.
Thanks, Randy.
Sure.
The story of my summer is that wherever I went, talking to people, I said, have you met Sarah Schoenhart? And the answer was, oh yeah, I already met her. Or, hey, I need to get in touch with somebody else, because she's already talked to them. Sarah Schoenhart embraced Rappahannock County this summer, and I think the county embraced her back. Your great contribution to this series was introducing us to the Rappahannock hustle. Talk about that just a little bit and what your takeaway was, and what you learned and what the county ought to learn about that.
Okay, so I'm different from most people on this panel in that I had never been to Rappahannock until the end of May. And I was enticed to come out here thanks to Andy Alexander, who told me I would have a lot of fun if I came to spend the summer in a really beautiful place. I'd been reporting on parts of rural Ohio, and so the thought of going and embedding in a rural community in some place different was really intriguing to me. And am I not speaking loud enough? Sorry. Is that better?
Turn on the one on the handle there, on the mic.
Hello?
Yes. We have
Gosh,
sound.
I never feel like I've been quiet. So I came and I knew about Rappahannock based on what I had read before coming here, and it intrigued me. There, as you all well know, there are very interesting demographics to this county. But I thought the best way to get to know this place would be to go out and meet as many people as I possibly could. So that was my approach. I thought the best way to tell the story of Rappahannock would be through the lens of the people who live here. And in doing so, I ended up speaking with people who were really struggling to make this place their home. And for various reasons, they chose to make very hard decisions to stay here because they loved it. And I think that introduced to me one of the real uniquenesses to Rappahannock, because in some ways, this county is not all that different than other counties that are similar. It deals with a lot of the same challenges of providing enough jobs and good jobs, lack of connectivity, things that I had heard in other places I've reported. But it does have this one overriding commonality, which is that people choose to be here because they just have such a devotion to this place. They love it. There's something that brings them here, and they'll do whatever they need to do to stay. And I thought that was something worth highlighting with this story about the Rappahannock hustle, looking at people who pick up various jobs in order to be able to live here in this county. And I hoped that by telling the stories of the different people and the different jobs that they go through or that they endeavor into to live in Rappahannock would, illuminate the really multifaceted community that exists here. It also introduced to me this idea that there's a really undergirding commonality among people living in the county. And I think that my takeaway in some ways is that there needs to be a way to tap into that, because everyone has ideas about what kind of community they want to be involved with, but community is something that I think people are seeking out. And how do you create a space where people from all over this county can gather together, regardless of class or age? And I think for part 4 of our series, one of the things that Randy and I tried to highlight by going to other places was showing examples of what other communities are doing, how they're trying to create, a place that's more livable and that is bringing in jobs and creating economic development. So sometimes it helps to see solutions happening in other places, to see what other areas are doing. And I hope that we accomplish that with our series. And it was a wonderful experience for me. I came down from DC today because I felt like I had a really nice connection with the community this summer, and it's nice to be back, and I'd like to see what happens to Rappahannock in the next few years. I'd like to see how...
Monitor, but just a quick aside. We went upon her arrival here this summer down to Etlin. We had an unfortunate drowning story down there. I was trying to get an ID on that. And we stopped on a porch, and there were 4 people strumming guitars. And we didn't know who they were, and we got out and we went up, and I introduced her to one of the gentlemen who was strumming his guitar. He was from, I think, down in Madison County, and I introduced her as our fellow. And he said, "Son, that's no fellow." They didn't know what chutney was, and they don't know what a fellow was. Anyway, Teresa Wood, Businesses of Rappahannock, and we're going to talk to everybody else who's our co-sponsor and part of this series. How did you become, a co-sponsor? I know you had a survey that we also ran. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So I'd like to acknowledge Bud with Foothills Forum as well, too. Thank you for the kind words, but we approached, our board approached Foothills Forum and said we'd like to work together. We think as a business community and as an organization, and many of the business owners are actually residents in this community, and so we feel like, can you guys hear me okay? I don't think I need that. We feel like because it's a community and residents work here and live here, that it's just very important for us to communicate and work with each other. And so we decided as a board, and we have 2 board members here, by the way, today. Jan Makla, who's our vice president, and then Bernie Olson, I can see you in the mirror, but I can't find you. There you are, is our secretary. And so the board decided this was a good fit. So we reached out, and here we are today. And so in the meantime, I learned a lot from Sarah and from Randy about what people in the community were saying. A year and a half ago, when I became the president of Businesses of Rappahannock, which, by the way, no one ran against me, so that's how I got to this position. But I feel blessed to be here, and so I've learned a lot. But what I also realized was when I took office, and I said, I'm going to talk to every member of Businesses of Rappahannock, all 138 of you. And I thought to myself, this is easy. I can check this off in a week. I'll just drive around, talk to everybody. Hey, how are you doing? It took me 1 whole year to talk to everyone. And it wasn't because of the distance between us. It was because everyone had so much to say. Every business owner wanted to be heard. They wanted to say, we need help. We are busy trying to run a business here, and we are surviving but not thriving. So this whole series, when I heard about it from Bud and with Randy and John Caslin and Dennis, it just seemed like the perfect fit because our businesses are asking for help. They're asking, for us to bring more people here. They're asking for what they need to do business. They didn't get transferred to Rappahannock. They chose to live here. They moved here because they love this place. And quite frankly, I'm on the agriculture side of the business world. And I can see how these 2 worlds come together because you have a love of the land. Everyone comes here because it's beautiful and it's bucolic and it's just a great place to live. People farm in the land, they love the land. People move here because they love the land. And so I see a commonality that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. But we are delighted to have worked with you all. We tried to connect Randy with some of our business members. He did a great job interviewing them. So did Sarah, and talking to them and getting their feedback. And it's a great community, and we want to continue to work with Foothills Forum as well as other nonprofits. This is really important to us. Jan, do you have anything to add to this?
Oh gosh, our mantra in Businesses of Rappahannock is that we want all businesses to succeed. We don't just choose tourism-related businesses, but we want everyone to get a piece of the pie. And it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle, but we're working really hard and providing lots of opportunities under Teresa's leadership, and we are thrilled to have done so many wonderful things this year for the business community. So I hope you've been paying attention. Please read the paper. Watch your emails if you're members. If you're not a member, join.
Yeah, so I think did I cover what you wanted me to cover? Absolutely.
All right.
So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jan and Bernie and Teresa as well. Mike Sands, the different parts of this series, as you read, Tim talked about the history. Part 2 was agriculture. Part 3, the business climate, retail, tourism, and then we get into agritourism's future and how other counties, as Randy mentioned, are handling this. And Sarah, and you could be a part of just about every one of these series, and you were, Mike. But the first thing I'd like you to tell everybody today is more about Ag Chat. What is it?
Sometimes I think it's just a figment of my imagination. The kind of core piece of Ag Chat, and I think all of our thoughts in thinking about agriculture here relate actually to Tim's first point, and that is that things change. And certainly in agriculture, there have been these major changes of apples. And he talks about them going to Washington. They actually went to Michigan first, and now they're in China. And those kind of changes are happening. And the challenge is how do we adapt and change the business model that each agricultural producer works on. And as you know, the vast majority of agriculture here now, and Kenner is much better with the numbers than I am, but certainly the huge majority are beef cow-calf operations. And then some commodity, some winery, or significant actually winery component, which is a new piece. Some of those have better business models in today's climate than others. And the challenge is to figure out how to adapt. We have a huge market, that where a lot of people migrated from. It represents a huge market. I've worked with a lot of producers in the Midwest who embrace suburban sprawl because they view it as the market's coming to my farm gate. I don't have to go to Washington, D.C. I don't think that's what we want to do here. But there are ways to think about how to add value. In a very small vignette of this, Bean Hollow Grass-Fed also does pastured pork, and we do a tiny amount of hogs a year on pastured pork. A package of frozen brats, 4 brats, roughly a pound, we retail for $9.50 a pound. Right now, my son is down at Penn Druid selling brats individually at $10 a pop, and that's a huge added value. Now, we need to transfer that into, as he sits there and sells 1 brat, he sells 1 package of brats or 1 package of pork chops or a steak or something else. But that's the way to start to add value to those kinds of things. There are agriculture here, I think in the future, the successful agriculture is going to be a more entrepreneurial business. Now the challenge is that our largest asset, the one that we all care so much about, is pasture. And it's in large holdings, and we'd like to keep it in large holdings. And how we facilitate those producers into the next model, or how do we keep that open space and still provide a living is the challenge. And hopefully over the next couple of years is when Ag Chat will start working on. We're hope this fall to ramp up dramatically with some additional programs, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me, Mike, what programs are you talking about?
Market development, some actual market development programs as one example. Some systems whereby there may be opportunities for farmers who improve the quality of the land through better pasture management and sequestering carbon, may be able to have some opportunities to monetize that in the future on some private markets. Those kinds of examples. We're going to wait and see. Part of it is going to be responsive to the producers that come forward and want to work with us.
For those of you who don't know, Mike and Molly filled the Washington Fire Hall with more than 100 people in January for an incredible day of talking about these topics. And that kind of leadership, I think, is what the county needs to move forward as we evolve. So I was deeply impressed by thoughtfulness and the preparation for that event. And we stole your playbook, Mike. Well done. Let's hope it works here too.
My guess is that it had nothing to do with leadership. It had to do with asking the right question on the right day at the right time.
And Bud, you mentioned Molly. That's the Petersons, who have tremendous impact in the county while they were here farming. And we wrote the story in the newspaper on their unfortunate departure, but it shows you how difficult farming can be, especially for young farmers in Rappahannock County. And I hope you read those stories, and I know they were expanded on more as well in the series.
Just to add one piece to that, though.
Yes.
Because that story is seen by many of us who were friends of Mike and Liza as a failure of the county, a failure of the market. To a certain extent it was, but it also is a great example of the quality of the experience here that makes people who work here and do things incredibly attractive. They were recruited. I mean, someone came looking for them. A very prestigious agricultural development group came looking for Mike Peterson and Molly to a certain extent to take them to the next step in a new era. So, like any institution, when you train people, when you build it, you're always disappointed when some of your good people leave, but you also need to think about that as a reflection on the quality of what you do. And I think that's important for us to think about here in the larger county environment.
Very good. Kenner Love, many of you know, with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Office in the town of Washington. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to state the state of agriculture, because that would take about 10 hours to do. But
2 seconds.
Yeah. If you could summarize that in a series for us in your thoughts.
The series?
Yes.
It's great. You guys did a fantastic job. But I feel like I've been called on the carpet. I've never sitting, I hate to sit in front of a group. I just feel like wrong folks. But one thing that struck me when I came up, I was looking for all the the pickup trucks out front. This is agricultural sort of forum, right? Well, I guess those farmers now are driving Subarus. So anyway, how many of you do farm, just out of curiosity? A handful. How many have been farming for more than 10 years? A couple folks. Cool. Yeah, John. John's been farming for a while, yeah. It's all good. So anyway, our everybody knows our population, our farming population is aging, much like the population of our county. So our farmers are getting old, and it's a young man's game. It's a tough life. It's a tough business. It's a rewarding business, but there's a lot of physical and mental and stressful kind of stuff that goes on with farming. And so the next generation from the farmers that have been here for a long, long time have chose different professions. Hopefully they'll come back, but who knows? So anyway, most of our farms in the county, I don't want to sound negative about it, but most of our farms in our county, what I would suggest everybody do is take a couple minutes, like Randy and those guys did, and look at the agricultural census. It's pretty eye-opening. But most of our farms, out of about 400, 367 of them have $50,000 to $100,000 in sales.
Kenner,
We need to-
could you use your mic, please, because a lot of people are having trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
So I hate this thing too, but anyway. So anyway, it's a real challenge, an economic challenge more than anything else. There's really no economic incentive for young people to come into farming. And I hate to say that and to be that negative. And Mike mentioned markets. There are a lot of different markets. And DC has the potential to provide a huge market for us, but we have to develop that. That's not automatic. There are people there, there are not markets there. And all those markets are already well developed by all of our neighbors. And we're competing with them, and also we're competing globally. So it's not an easy task. We're relatively small. Our farms are tiny. The trend is the economy of scale. Most farms are getting larger, and they have to, not by choice, but just the economic situations driving that. So I'm not sure what else to say other than that. It's really difficult for our farmers. The only, I guess what's left over at the end of the day for our farmers is their assets, and that's the land. They don't have enough money set aside to pass it down to the next generation for them to be profitable. So the only option they have to do is to cash out, really, to live comfortably in their retirement. I've had several farmers tell me that they've farmed here all their life that they haven't paid enough in the Social Security to stop farming because they didn't make enough money. So that's a sad state of affairs. I really don't know how to turn that around. That's a tough one. But there are different markets. We have to work on those. They're niche markets. They're commodity markets. We're in a global market, so we're all at competition and got a lot of work to do. So I've told you more than I know. But,
Well, what we'll do is
answer questions.
we're gonna definitely open it up, and then we're gonna do these breakouts. But we're gonna open it up for about 15 minutes. And you've seen the panel and the writers who are here, and we encourage you to ask questions. But I've got here on the list that Dennis Brack, the publisher of the newspaper, you have a Quickie Mart anecdote that you want to share?
No. I think Bud wanted us to share. You always wonder how your work connects with people. And Jan Clatterbuck, who is our sort of den mother, among other things, was delivering the paper one morning. And when the second or third part of this series came out, the couple of guys that are there every morning were just eating it up. There was this, and asked her, when are you going to do more of these stories? And so I think because of the topic is so relevant to everybody in this county, it really connected.
Well, that's great. Yes, please.
One thing I neglected to mention, and this is a point that a number of people, particularly people who are farmers, mentioned to me. They said that there's a distinction between people who like the look of farms and the appearance of farms and the people who value the productivity of farms. And they're two different things. And I think that's part of the, if there's a tension and conflict, because people who aren't necessarily farmers say, God, I love these rolling hills and the pastures. This is spectacular out here. But as some of the farmers have told me, farming isn't a pretty thing necessarily. you have to do some things that aren't so beautiful. And so, part of the question is, well, what is it that people truly value? Do they want the farms to be more productive, or do they want the farms to be more beautiful? And so I think it's something that people really need to acknowledge. Kenner and I had that conversation. So.
Just one other point I forgot to make. It's just farming's really become.
Everybody needs to use the mic.
It's really, farming here has become a byproduct of land ownership. I just wanted to point that out there.
Well, the statistic you mentioned, 367 out of 400, and I'm sure some of those, while they might be on the higher side towards 150 of production, a lot of them are the so-called hobby farms you guys talked about, and that's something to consider too as well. Let's open it up. You know who's here, you know the writers, and I hope you know if you need any reminders of what the various sections in our series were about, we can go into that. Ma'am?
Well, to really focus on the farming piece, as I recall, there was 15 years ago maybe, an association of small farmers, some sort of organization that tried to coordinate small farmers and tried to brand, or maybe they actually did, the concept of Rappahannock bread. And I just sort of wonder what happened to that organization, or if there's anything left there to build on. Do I need to repeat it?
Start over again.
Sorry.
And tell us who you are.
I'm sorry, I'm Ann Yeoman. I work more in the matching savings asset building world. But I am a farmer by background. I grew up milking dairy cows. So my question is, there was 15 years ago or so, approximately, an association of small farmers. I think it was called Rappahannock Small Farmers Association or something like that. And I believe that there was discussion, or maybe they actually did brand the term Rappahannock bread. And I wondered what became of that, and if there's anything left of that to build on, or are there lessons to be learned if it in fact has completely disappeared?
Here. I'm your Vanna White today.
Doing a good job, Jim.
So everybody needs to use the mic, so I'll pass it around.
Who wants to answer that question? Kenner?
There was a Rappahannock Farmers Association. It kind of ran its course. I don't know that there's much to build on from that. They did a reasonably good job of providing educational programs to the farming community. And then they had some other social events, but that was kind of their focus for education. But that's...
They still exist, I think, on paper.
Maybe, yeah. But they're haven't been active in, like you said, 15 years.
So then what are the lessons to learn from that could be applied now?
Wow.
We don't know yet. That's one of the things.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how many people that were part of that organization are still around.
I know a few are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good workout.
I have a nagging question, and it has to do with Kenner's first statement. Where are the pickup trucks? In the parking lot.
Mine's in the field.
No, just observing who wants the change and what kind of change.
It's a very fair question, Randy.
And really, where are the farmers? Where are the people with the pickup trucks?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think they,
Just to say, I mean, I don't know that a lot of people here, and a few, but there are no pickup trucks in the parking lot. That's it.
Yeah, I think that it's a small sample, admittedly, of people that I talk to, longtime farmers, and I think their attitude is pretty much, you know what, I'm busy farming. You know, this is a really demanding job, and I don't have time to go somewhere and sit and talk about farming. You know, and I think there's also this notion that, you know, we've been doing this for 2 and 3 generations. I don't really see the compelling reason for me to go and talk about this with people who want to maybe change things. And it's not like they're shutting their eyes, but it's like I just have other priorities. You know, and I think that that's really one of the challenges. How do you get people, aside from those in this room, how do you get different types of people at these meetings? How do you make them value it?
It's a very complex problem. I think it's the same problem as, you know, the U.S. going to Africa or like South America, and, you know, so you need this kind of, we see you need this help, you know.
Yeah, I think they really need a lot of help marketing. They're pretty good at what they do. They're good at farming. They like farming. They like the production side of things, but they're not real good at marketing. And that's a different skill set. And so if you really want to help farmers move product, add value, whatever you want to do, you've got to create that market for them. Otherwise, you're a price taker, and whatever commodity you're selling, whatever the price happens to be that day is what you're going to get. And that's just the market. That's the way the free markets work in agriculture forever.
Isn't that part of your job to instigate this
Yeah,
kind of thing?
we have, yes, it is. And we work at it, but it's not an easy sell.
I have a question, and I don't know if it's for Randy and Sarah, who talk to people outside the county, or Mike, you've got contacts in so many places. But I wonder if you can share some examples of other places that have looked at the situation and found paths to market development. What does a successful market development look like? Can anybody, Mike?
I mean, the quick answer to that is, it depends. Okay? Because markets are unique. They're unique to the product, they're unique to the location, they're unique to the larger environment, they're unique to regulations, both local and state. So each of those constrain or define the market opportunity. There are lots of examples of places where, let's use beef, because that's, frankly, if you want to talk about the farming community that's not here, that is the most visible for people as they drive through because of the large landholdings. Beef here is entirely a commodity market, with the exception of a couple of us who are just starting, frankly, in the unique stuff. But the vast majority of beef here goes to the Midwest, the West, and then comes back as packaged beef. Kenner's point is, there are people in the Baltimore to Richmond area, but those aren't markets. You have to develop that market. Now, there are examples. In Wisconsin, where I work, there is a Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Grass-Fed Beef Cooperative. And they have taken cow-calf producers and worked now 10 years in building a market in the Chicago region for grass-fed beef that they market. And it's doing well. It's taken 10 years. It's involved a lot of collaboration. One of the points that Randy and others have made is that there's a change that has to happen. People have to start to collaborate. They have to work nights on committees. It's not fun work, but that's where you're going to get, if you want farmers to come to a discussion, you have a specific question and opportunity and say, let's work on this. Then you can get farmers some percentage.
I just add it needs to be scale appropriate too. And that's something we don't often think about.
I can just speak to the example in part 4. I went down to Nelson County and wrote about some of the different types of economic development that county was trying to pursue. And there are differences. Its population density is similar, which is one reason we looked to that county, but they don't have the same kind of ordinances on land, so people can split the land up into smaller parcels. So there's not as much of a commitment to keeping these large tracts of land for agriculture. But people also recognize that farming is struggling, and when you're in a situation where you need to bring in revenue to a county, how do you best exploit that opportunity? And so they were willing to go through a little pain to bring some money into the county. And what they did, I think, successfully in many ways, and it has yet to be seen how this will play out in the future, but they managed to provide some examples of economic development that didn't destroy the land. I think there's a fear here that pursuing another model outside of agriculture will lead to a Walmart on the corner in Sperryville. And I don't think that that's necessarily, those are two ends of an extreme. And so being able to show that utilizing farmland and agriculture and bringing in businesses like a brewery or farm-to-table restaurant or something like that has been successful for them, and they're really drawing a lot of visitors to that county. So that was one avenue that we pursued in our reporting to show what other places are doing, and Randy highlighted several in other counties around this region. So, you know, to the earlier question about why there aren't more pickup trucks here, I would also say for some people I think it's cost-benefit analysis. I mean, I think that speaking out or pursuing change can be, it creates a lot of fear, and it can be somewhat painful. I mean, anytime you're trying to overhaul an economy that has operated a particular way for so long, that's not going to be to everyone's liking. And so speaking out about that in a community where more people don't want change perhaps than others, I think you're just putting yourself in a vulnerable situation. So I don't know that everyone wants to talk, even though they might have ideas about things.
Yeah, I would just add too that, and Kenner, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but there is a fellow in Fauquier County, Ray Pickering, who is, his position is economic development for agriculture. So essentially, he's looking at ways to create, help farmers create other businesses and find other revenue opportunities for them. And that's something that it's, I think they're, again, this is not Fauquier County, they're two very different creatures, but the notion there is we have a lot of farmers, we have a lot of struggling farmers. What can we do as a county to ensure that they can sustain themselves? And what other opportunities can we perhaps not provide to them, but at least what other incentives might we give them to develop other sorts of things?
Can I just say one thing very quickly? We have, as businesses at Rappahannock, we have a representation in the agricultural community. And one thing that we're hearing to what Sarah said is that farmers will approach us on the side who have large pieces of land that have been here a long time. They don't want to go before the Board of Supervisors and ask for permission to do events on their property, but they want to know, can we help them? Is there something that they should know that would help them to do something else with their property? They have land and they need to utilize it in another way, but they feel hamstrung by politics and sort of what Sarah was saying is that it's a risk to put yourself out there as a member of the community, a longstanding member of the community. So there are people out there with interest, and I'm sure Mike has heard this too, that want to do something different with their land. They're just afraid to come forward to do that. And, you know, I have to tell you, to answer your question, I wouldn't be here today if I weren't on this side of the table, because I have a ranch and I have cattle and I have animals, and they require a lot of time. So it's hard to get somebody out in the field to do something like this.
There's a tractor sitting idle in my field.
Yeah. I have a business partner who's really unhappy right now.
I think Bill Deedle also had a question back there. One thing Teresa said, I can't imagine anybody being concerned about the business climate and the political climate in this country. Can't figure that out. Mr. Deedle.
I have 2 points I'd like to make. First of all, how many supervisors are there here?
Well, they were all invited, sir.
How many paid county employees are here?
The one that matters.
It strikes me that the very people who are going to have to play an important role in helping deal with the problems you're talking about, those people who are in positions of political power, they don't show up for this meeting. And I hope the newspaper will point that out in its coverage of this meeting. Secondly, and you touched on it earlier, this issue of inadequate capital for young people in agriculture, that is not an insoluble problem. Our local banks are of little or no help to would-be farmers, would-be people doing agriculturally related business. But right in the room, we've got a terrific example of what happens when a critical institution, the newspaper, can't manage to do the job it wants to do because it hasn't got the financial resources to cover the county. And a group of private citizens got together and created Foothills Forum. Now, why isn't that a model to try to address the risk capital problem of the agricultural community? That's my question.
Mr. Brack, would you like to respond to Mr. Daly? And I think Bud could too, because it is.
I think Bud is more appropriate to respond.
Well, thanks, Bill, for acknowledging that at least we got this many people here today after this really terrific, I think, groundbreaking series, the latest addressing the issues of the county. And I'm going to brag for a second. These people have won Virginia Press Association Awards top prizes in the state of Virginia as the smallest entrant in the state's journalism awards. And I think they deserve a round of applause for that. Bill, I think it starts with getting the crowd together. Who do you think, and anybody who would be interested in that topic, give them a seat. Organize the meeting and see where the idea might go from here. It takes a while, doesn't it? To start with a simple idea, to germinate it, to grow from that idea to an organization takes a while. Takes a small army. So.
I was just curious about it. I wanted to ask John, which inspired John a little bit. John's been in the agriculture business in the county for, I think, 20 years, 25 years. So we've talked a lot about marketing. I was just curious about your marketing, and then we talked a little bit about capital and the capital needs to start a business similar to yours. Could you speak to that just a little bit from a farming point of view?
Sure. I've been sitting here scratching my head listening to this, and I got so many points to make, my head's exploding, I think. My name's John. Hello? Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
My name's John Del Mar. I'm with Rappahannock Sellers. And yes, we've been farming in the county for 20-some years, and I've been farming grapes and making wine for about 30 years. You know, and I'm an economist by training and a winemaker by trade. And it seems to me that this issue comes back to something really fundamental. And fundamentally, our land's too expensive here to farm on. I mean, all of us farmers who are farming in Rappahannock, most of us, are subsidized. We either were subsidized by Grandpa, who left us the land. We are subsidized because we made a fortune somewhere else and we retired to Rappahannock, and we're hobby farmers. I probably have, our wine industry is a little luckier. I still feel subsidized because I had another career and subsidized my lifestyle. And I couldn't afford just a hobby farm. I've got a big family, I have to support my family on it, so I've created a business that does that. Does it give me the kind of return on my assets that anybody, the average businessman would need? No, it doesn't. Capital here is hard to get because we can't justify it. You know, my experience is create a business that has cash flow and show the bank that you can pay them back. They'll lend you money all day long. I had my banker in 2 weeks ago, and sitting around the table and saying, "Oh, I'm kind of thinking about doing X, Y, and Z in the future. What sort of programs do you have?" A week later, she called and said, "I've got your loan approved." I said, "What loan?" "Well, for your new building you want to build." So, I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to develop a market. Wine, we got here at a time when the wine industry was starting to take off. We got in early. We've been lucky, rather lucky than smart. We've made a few moves that have paid off in terms of developing a market, and we are able to draw a lot of people out here. Frankly, we're lucky that we can do value add. I mean, I don't look at myself as much as a farmer as I do a manufacturer. Yeah, I grow grapes and I have to live and die by what I grow in the field, but my money's not made in the field. If I was just growing grapes, I'd be broke 19 and a half years ago. You can't do it, and you can't do it on land that's this expensive. The only way to make that living was to do the value add, to build the winery, to make my grapes into wine, and go that next step. So, where am I going with this? I think the county has to realize that, like everywhere else in the world, as the underlying land values go up, Reston used to be Coalfields. You could never afford a cow pasture there anymore. And as that land rises, there's a period of time in Rappahannock where we're going to be able, if we do it smartly, we can support agriculture here if we allow agriculture to do what it needs to do to survive. Just running cow-calf operation out there probably isn't going to pay for the land. Maybe developing a grass-fed market and a real local market to feed that demographic, that marketing wave that's taken over in the marketplace in terms of buy local and people getting serious about eating healthy products and wanting grass-fed. As one example, maybe that value add, which takes a lot of extra time and effort and money to grass feed that animal and bring it to market than throwing it on a feedlot and giving it corn in the Midwest and shipping it back here. Those are the kinds of things that I think the industry can do and have a chance at affording to farm here. Still pretty tough, in my opinion, doing traditional agriculture, raising animals, raising crops. Wineries can do it because there's enough of a value add, taking our grapes and putting them in a bottle that, and we're largely unencumbered by regulatory constraint. We've been able to build these wineries under the state law, which has given us a big leg up over a farmer who says, man, I really love running cattle. If I could just run a few events on my land a year, maybe I could still afford to do it. What's the old adage? You farm until the money's gone. Everybody's just trying to hang on, and our kids are waking up and going, man, this is a lot of work for not much return. And Dad's kicked the bucket, and here's the farm. It's worth a lot of money. Nobody can afford to buy it and continue farming it. So it gets bought, and now it's somebody's trophy property, and maybe they subsidize a farmer and let somebody grow cattle or hay or whatever on their ground. But it takes that subsidy unless we can develop the markets and allow people to do the things they need to do to have their land pay for itself and to make a living out there. Too many farmers are just hobby farmers, and we've retired to farming. I'd love to be able to do that, but I can't. I have too many mouths to feed.
I'd like to just make one addition to John's point, because he touched on it, but he's too humble not to really say. The other piece is the quality. I mean, you can't just run cows on grass and call it grass-fed beef and think it's good. You can't just grab some grapes, throw them in a vat, and ferment it and call it wine. The quality is critical. The people who survive are people who do things very well. And there's a misnomer as we go through changes that we're trying to make it available for everybody and everyone can survive. Businesses come and go. I don't care if it's in agriculture, in the food business, and everything else, and whether it's in rural areas or in urban areas. The ones that survive, yes, lucky is really, really important, but also it's producing a valuable, high-quality product.
John Fox Sullivan, the mayor of Washington.
Well, actually, I think Barney had her hand up first.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll stand up so you can all see me.
Here comes the mic.
So my first question, I came because, my Bernie Olson, and I came because I'm very curious about this topic in our county. But my first question to all of you is, how many of you need a job?
I'm going to get rid of it. If you're an extension, you're going to get it.
So that's really, to me, that's really telling because I appreciate everybody here that is interested in this topic. But I think that there are people that need jobs or that are looking for jobs that will help them stay here. So here we have this group of people that are really concerned about this, and I applaud every single one of you to be here for that. So I closed my business up back in December, and Annie kind of took over the store there, and I'm really excited. It's so cool in there. I love it. It's beautiful. It's like she's taken it to another level, and that's beautiful. And I had my business for 10 years, and I'm not, the first thing I want to say is, there's an element that it sounds like that we're kind of victims out here. Oh, I'm a victim too, not enough business or whatever. I took on that business because I wanted to do that. I got interested in it, and I had a lot of fun with it for the 10 years that we did it. And I got to the point where it was time to end that job. But at some points I needed money. Did I feel like I could go to a group of people, or I could go to the bank and go, I get an extra 10, 20 grand, could you give that to me? I knew I'd have to pay that money back. So I had to struggle to get to make that money. And so the whole thing about how we subsidize people or how we do that, I'm really confused about it because it makes me feel like I started that business. I did it, and that's somebody said something alluded to. There's this element of people wanting to do their own thing. I did that business. I don't have anybody to blame that it ended or that it changed or anything like that. And I think that that's an element that I keep hearing of. So I don't know how we suss that out or how we kind of figure that out, or if y'all understand that. But we do, we come out here and we do that. My third point is, there's so much good in this county and so many great businesses that are doing really well. And sometimes we forget to focus on how well these businesses are doing. And in that part of that business is, a lot of those businesses are run by two people. And I didn't hear that theme of that in the stories that I've read. But if you look around, Dan and I ran that business for 10 years. My friend Janet and her husband run the native plant nursery. They've been doing that for 10 or 15 years. Kevin and Sherry do. If you look at most of the businesses here, it's partners that are doing these businesses. And if it weren't for partners, we wouldn't have those businesses. So I think that's another really big thing that I think has been missed, that it's a partnership. Farms, almost all farms are done by partners. I don't know if that's a point or not, but I think that is it's the micro businesses of Rappahannock that make it. And how do we support these? I was talking to one of the, when they had the Republican-Democrat debate. Do you know who listened to me about this? The Republican guy. He's out there and he goes, tell me more about the micro businesses here in Rappahannock. And so I sat and I bent his ear about it because it was like, that's where we need to support those, whatever the business is, agriculture, antiques, physical therapy, whatever it is, we need to support those couples that are really working hard to do those things. How do you do that? I don't know, because I didn't want to go to anybody and ask for money. I didn't want to say, I could really use this or I could really use that. I felt like I had to do it on my own. Anyway, but my last closing point I want to say again, Rappahannock is a really fantastic, there are a lot of fantastic businesses, and yes, they come and go, but it is a really, I wish we could just keep that sight of, I was thinking about that, how many problems are there here? I come home to Rappahannock, I'm working outside of Rappahannock right now, but I want to live here because this is my home, and so I'm going to find something to do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Mayor Sullivan.
A thought/observation in trying to create work for other people, maybe Foothills. Someone used the phrase early lessons learned, and listening to John and other people. It might be interesting for somebody to look at 4 or 5, quote, success stories in this county of their businesses. So I'm moving away from agriculture, by the way. I don't know what you do about agriculture. But there are businesses that are successful. And it'd be interesting to sort of do a thoughtful analysis of what makes them successful. A small little anecdote, I'm picking on Bernie, and only because I read it in the Tom Seaton. McPherson down here started this restaurant. Great reviews, it's fabulous. People say, why isn't it open more than 3 days? Because McPherson's model is, he doesn't want to be open a whole lot of days and hire a bunch of people. He doesn't want a whole lot of people coming at once. He wants just a small number. Well, that's his, what appears to be maybe going to be successful. The other side of it is, how about taking a look at it, not necessarily failures, but there are a lot of businesses that aren't, I agree with Bernie, a lot of people doing well, but a lot of businesses that aren't doing as well as people think they are. And they're pretty well-known businesses. And if you can kind of look at, find 3 or 4 of them in a private, respecting privacy. But you said, well, why isn't that working? What's the problem? Are there lessons you can get out of the successes or the failures in this county that would lead you to say, A, B, C, or D? Now I'm going to tell a tiny little anecdote, which is sort of illustrative, and I love the anecdote. Everybody knows the Sperryville fire, 4th of July, moved from Bill Fletcher's to Benvenue this year, right? And when that happened, everybody said, why did that happen? Why did that happen? And most people said, well, Bill wanted this, Bill. And I'm talking to Frank Williams. He says, one reason we moved? I said, why is that? He said, that Wi-Fi access on Benvenue. He says, all the vendors were going crazy in Fletcher's place because you could only take cash or check. See, now we're Benvenue, because there's a tower there, the vendors are ecstatic, and there'll be more vendors and blah, 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 blah. Not to go off of the value of Wi-Fi and all that stuff, but it's just sort of interesting what made something successful when you might have thought it was something totally different.
Yeah. Very good point. Could I follow up on something that John Delmar said? You talked about the cost of the land here. And obviously we know how pricey it is being this close to the megalopolis as we are. And you spoke positively that we can survive in the agriculture industry if we learn how to develop the markets. How do we do that? Do we do that, in your case, individually? Do you do it by getting together with the rest of the wineries, or in their case, with the rest of the cattle farmers? Do you do it in consultation with the county government, the supervisors who aren't here today? How can we do this?
My opinion?
Yeah.
Well, I think it varies greatly by what market segment you're talking about. I can speak to the wineries from the standpoint that I have always preached our Virginia wine industry, not just our Rappahannock wine industry, but our Virginia wine industry, is a very, very large percentage are people who are doing this as a hobby. They got into it later in life, they're in semi-retirement, this was something fun that they thought they would love to do, and they are largely not run as serious businesses. And not, I don't mean to demean anybody, but it's a very different attitude. I have 12 children. And they're all standing there and they have to be fed, that's a lot of motivation at the end of the day for the business, right? But if it's my wife and I, and we're sitting back, and this is our place we bought in the country, we planted some grapevines, and we built a little winery, I don't even have to pay myself a paycheck. I just don't want it to lose money. That's a very different kind of mentality. And unfortunately, I would say that there are a good 70-80% of the wineries in this state and probably in this county that fall into that same category. So it's been very difficult in our industry to get wineries together and have a cohesive plan because our motivations are so very different. So it's been very hard. We've tried Artisan Trail of Rappahannock, we've had Blue Ridge Wineway, we've had these different marketing groups that have popped up, and they've been very difficult. So I'm not sure I have an answer for your question other than to say that's part of the problem. Some of the other industries, I'm sure that some of the other traditional farming in the room and in this county suffer from kind of the same thing, because a lot of people out here are not farmers by, if they are lifelong farmers, it's because they inherited the farm. Nobody comes to Rappahannock and looks for a great piece of ground to raise cattle on because that's the business I want to be in. Well, I should say nobody, right? Never say no. Get yourself in trouble. And if people are doing that, I'll bet that they have a little different vision of what kind of, maybe it's the grass-fed. It's something that I would say is value add. It's not your traditional cow-calf operation that I'm going to roll up a bunch of hay and run some cows. And, I can pay for this land based on how many cow-calf pairs I can put on it or something of that nature. So I'm rambling, and I apologize for that. I don't know what the answer is, but I think the answer includes bringing a lot of different people together. And we have a county that has not been, at least at the government level, has not been willing to carve out any sort of real support for developing markets, for agritourism, for in any respect, not just for agriculture. I think it's going to take them. I think it's going to take everybody at the end of the day. And I don't think we can do it. Largely, we can't do it in our own little microcosm. Rappahannock is just not that big. If we had 40 wineries here, oh my gosh, yeah, we could all get together and maybe do something. But when we have 6, 7, 8, 9 of them, and 4, 5, 6 of them or whatever are happy to continue doing what they're doing, and maybe there's a few of us that want to expand it, it's just not the critical mass there to make that happen.
Interesting. Annie, you need to say something?
Yeah.
I missed you.
I just wanted to kind of go back to where Bernie was a little bit in terms of I'm a business owner in Rappahannock County. I have been for 11 years. I think the success of my business has been allowing other businesses to begin here. So I have offered opportunities for multiple people in the county to come in and start a business here in a safe way, because it's very difficult to step in and have $1 million to start a business with. So because you can never pay yourself back, but if you can come in and be helped to start a business, so the way I set things up is that my practitioners, some of the practitioners that are in here just give me a portion of what they bring in, and they don't have to worry about the overhead, and they don't have to worry about the electric bill and all of those things when they're first getting started. And that's, I don't have 12 children, but I do probably have 12 families that I support every day, so I understand the need to make that money come in at the end. But I value in my business what it is we do, the opportunities that we give now, all the vendors and artists as well. It's not a great take home for me in terms of paychecks, but I get to play it forward. And now I've been given the opportunity to have this land where possibly many other things could take place that would benefit this county. And I think that there's a lot of needs that this county have that are not fulfilled, things that we need, like drugstores and maybe more places to get food and things like that. So I think that we, in looking at our economy here, we should look at some of those things that would help the people that are in this county and fulfilling some of their needs so that more of their money can be spent within the county, not outside of the county.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt the discussion. I'm going to interrupt the discussion here to shift gears, but you'll have an opportunity to join in again. What we had originally planned on doing was, way back an hour ago or sometime, we were going to break into 3 groups and have some discussions on topics about what we do next. But the conversation was so good, and I think there are a couple of really great ideas that are sitting on the table. We decided not to do that. I know we're reaching kind of the end of the time we had promised would get you out after about 90 minutes, but if we can go forward a little longer. What I'd like to do is mention some of the things that I heard, and then ask other people to help me recap what we might have missed, so we're not leaving anything that we should focus on. what we're talking about is, this is just brainstorming at this point. We're not saying anybody has to make a commitment, but we've identified some things that could be done if we can find the people to do them. And I think the one that really captured mine was Bill Bill's comments that the lack of financing, the lack of money to support people, that is a problem for which other people have found solutions. I've been involved in activities elsewhere looking at the problem that women in many markets, particularly the tech sector, have in getting financing. And so lots of women have come together with joint venture funds, and they put their money in and they invest it knowing they might not get it back, or they maybe even make grants to groups who want to collaborate in some way. So one idea that Bill raised is, can we bring people together and look at mechanisms that other places or market sectors are using, whether it's loans or grants or co-signing or straight out investment, or teaching people about the skills of financing if you're trying to go up. So that's one, a theme that seems like it's something we might want to pursue. We also noted, I don't have a solution, I'm just noting it's a theme that is in the room, which is that people need more engagement and support from officials, from our elected officials, and we maybe could use additional roles in governance here in Rappahannock County, was a theme that was raised. We talked about how there's a need for people to come together, and actually the start of people coming together in several areas. One, of course, is Ag Chat. I think developing markets is part of what we were talking about, but implicit in what you're saying is find a way to teach people how to work together to identify the markets. That's an area where it seems to be important, and I'm assuming it's not just in farming. I'm guessing other businesses are interested in, and collaboration generally to address these things. I think the businesses of Rappahannock appears to be doing a spectacular job of getting people talking, and creating a culture of collaboration is, I think, a big contribution that you've been making, and it's sort of implicit in everything we're talking about here. There's another phrase, and I can't remember, maybe Tim used, that I like, that businesses that have been successful and have been able to adapt with the time is they've had a culture of continuous learning. And I'm wondering if there are other things that we can do in this county for businesses to provide a culture of continuous learning, so that we can give people the skills they need, whether it's financial or collaboration or whatever it is. That feels like something that you folks are starting on. And Bernie made a point that really I think we don't want to forget is the Rappahannock hustle, is that there are a lot of really smart, clever, dependable, wonderful people, many of our younger residents who want to stay here. Maybe they grew up here, and they've just got to work all of the time because they don't have jobs. They're very inventive, they're doing all kinds of wonderful things, but is there something that people could come together to do that creates something more like a marketplace, or maybe grants for somebody who desperately needs help but can't afford it, to help them start? That's something that I think we don't want to forget from what people were saying. Randy noted, and it's worth thinking about, I didn't want to lose that, is that maybe we need to think about the possibility of regional solutions. You know, there's no moat about the county. There's not, we had all the floods, but still we can try to adjoining counties and see what they're doing. Maybe there's some things we can work together regionally. Again, from Bernie, more support for micro businesses. Some kind of incubation programs. I mean, there are lots of things that other communities have done with business incubation, with help, support, training, funding. I love the idea of we need to focus more and more carefully on exactly what it is that has characterized the successes that we do have. The great history of jobs here, focused on resilience and the character of the people, but we need to look at some of the specifics like Wi-Fi or learning how to add value at every point, or what are those things? So that's something that Foothills Forum can focus some of our work on. And then, of course, Wi-Fi came up, and Wi-Fi always comes up no matter what we're talking about. So those are the themes that I heard that we want to not lose track of. So my questions for the group are two. What have I missed from our kind of summary, and who needs to move forward? Who wants to keep talking? How do we go forward? Yes, ma'am.
I don't believe in reinventing the wheel, and I also believe in serendipity. And so I would suggest, and I don't know, Sarah, if you and Randy, when you were looking at what other communities are doing, but what we've been sort of talking about around this whole last hour and a half, which I'm kind of getting relief on this one, because I've been doing a lot of work on a lot of the topics that you all have been talking about here for the last couple of years for a variety of reasons. But I think that there's a vehicle that we can use that other communities are using, and that is something called a Community Development Corporation. And I don't know how many people in this room know what a CDC is, but it is something that it can be a for-profit or it can be a not-for-profit. If it's a not-for-profit, all you have to do is file a 501c3 application. And it's a group like this from all different walks of life that come together and outline exactly what we've outlined here. I mean, there's some other things that aren't on that list, like affordable housing, like taking care of our seniors. But essentially what we've just been talking about is creating a community development corporation. And I think the fact that we're already far along in that process. I mean, we've all been sort of reading these great articles, but we need a vehicle. We need some way to start to organize all the ideas that are in this room and start to prioritize them. There are probably people who aren't here that need to be in this conversation that we need to reach out to. But I would suggest that this group needs to decide who wants in to at least go the next step of saying, let's look at this and let's figure out a way to start to prioritize how we go about the process. But there is a vehicle, and the one other vehicle, which is something that we either can create or we can piggyback on with other people, is a community development financial institution, which is something that right now there are not a lot of them in Virginia, but there's some that we could tap into. And I've already got some beginnings of information and contacts about how to do this, but it just feels like, you guys, we're here at a point in time when we need to start to organize.
I'll sign up for that one.
And I think the fact that we're not attracting some of the farmers is a good reason. I mean, Michael's right. We got the track. I mean, it was like 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. We're going to go and spend.
With the sun shining.
With the sun is shining and the rain is, predicted for the next 3 days. So if people are interested, I'm more than willing to sit down with whoever wants to do it and hash this thing out. But time is coming to do something.
Betsy, can you elaborate just a tiny bit on what that involves? Like what sort of commitment do you need? What sort of?
It's people organizing, it's people getting together, creating a board. It's sitting down and figuring out what are the kind of key issues that people really want to start to work on. If you want to look at an example, and it's not agriculturally based, but it's a really interesting one. There's a little organization in, I don't know where it's located in Kentucky, but it's called Coalfields Development. And Coalfields Development is a group of people who got together and said, our industry is dying, whether for another 2 years it survives, but we know it's never going to come back at the level. We got to do something. And so it's organizing an entity, incorporating, becoming either a 501c3 or a for-profit. And it's essentially a group of people like us coming together and say, okay, here's boom, boom, boom. These are the 5 things we're going to do.
Could we use an existing corporation? I mean, we have businesses, Rappahannock, which already has 200 members in it. Can you use an existing
You could conceivably use an existing corporation. Yeah, and that would be something to look at, is maybe that's what you do. Maybe you take an existing entity and create something from that. Yeah.
So Betsy, I'm going to leave a pad here, and if anybody is interested in joining at least a conversation about next steps, and I hope Teresa, after next week, after it's done. Certainly, we need to have a discussion that's sort of focused on that, because there's not time to pursue that here, but I will put my name here on that list. Now, my question for our leader in the group is, how much time do we have before we plunge into other suggestions?
I'm highly motivated to wrap this up in 5 minutes.
All right. If we have to say something. All right, we only have 5 minutes left for discussion.
Very quick.
Okay.
I just want to say that I used to be a social worker. And when we were told that in order to help people, the first thing we need to do is to listen to them. So it sounds like you got an organization that's happening. And I think a very important step is to go to the people and say, well, what is it exactly that you want? What do you need? So that this can take over.
My point is different, which is that there seems to be a strong resistance to change here in the community. And some of those elements that are very resistant to change kind of tend to typecast people like us as do-gooders that are just bothering them, who should leave people alone and not come and create bike trails or put cell phone towers or have events. Life is wonderful here. Why all those come here's, come with crazy ideas and figure out, just leave us alone, quote unquote. I think there is something to be said about addressing these people, addressing this resistance to change. I'm an economist, I'm not a sociologist, so I don't know how to go about it. But I think this is a very serious problem, overarching all the specific points, how to address the market failures, create the markets, improve the productivity. Those are all wonderful things. But if there is an overwhelming resistance in many pockets of the community, just leave us alone and don't rock the boat or whatever, I think our efforts will be sort of doomed to failure, because we're a small segment trying to create change, and these people hate change.
Let me just to respond though, and looking at future coverage, the issues we're looking at, we're trying to parse some of that and look at kind of dialogue and look at some of the pieces. Jan.
Okay, I'm one of those born here's, ran away from here's, came back again to here people. And I love this place, loved it so much. Grew up here, have deep roots in this community. And one of the things that I've discovered is that change is not a terrible thing. People are fearful of certain things. I'm just tossing this out just because I think these are things that I've taken away from this today. I think it's important that we all just kind of think about it. I grew up in a family that Bertie was talking about that had a mom and dad, a grandmother and grandfather before them, that started a little mom and pop operation 100 years ago. My parents ran it together for 57 years. So they were of that group. And they did it very successfully, but they worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Everybody doesn't want to do that. I went to college, ran away after college, stayed away for 20 years, played, developed a love of technology through the years. And there are things that I know are important that we need to address in this community.
But I think the reason some of these things are so difficult to address all comes back to communication and mutual respect. We all are in this community that we love very much and that we want to see succeed. Yet we have, and I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. I have lots of come here friends. I have lots of been here friends. And I'm sort of skirting, I'm sort of on the fence. And I love all of these people. You have to understand, these are my friends and I care about them. And I think they're all lovely people who have great ideas. But they don't talk to each other. And I suggested to someone the other day that whenever we go to a county meeting, that everybody should pick somebody they don't know or don't agree with and sit next to them and just have a no, seriously, just have a conversation, because it's really hard to dislike a person when you've just had a conversation with them. Hey, how you doing? What's happening on your farm? Gee, I love that piece of sculpture I saw at Ballard's. I think it's just, we've become polarized. We just need to talk to each other. And when we do that, then these problems are not so insurmountable. They become, we may not always agree, and that's fine. But we can sure make some headway. And that's something that businesses in Rappahannock, this is my plug, although I wasn't going to say this at the beginning, is trying to do with Lunch and Learns, with a women's breakfast group, with other things like that. Just trying to get lots of diverse people together to have conversations. So anyway, thank you.
Jen. And we'll keep track of that, because there are ways you can structure conversations and make it easier. Sheila, some last words there.
Yeah, sorry. I just have, is this on?
Oh, it's on. It's on.
Okay. I think there are just a very few people who are really disagreeing. And I think this thing is coming together as an entire group of very diverse people. We're not trying to do something like a specific element, which is the bike path. We're coming together to talk about our economic survival here. And I think a very good point that I think it was Mike brought up, somebody brought up, or who brought up about the Fauquier economic development, that's putting it into the hands of government. I think Gary has enough on his plate at this point that I think Bessie's idea of citizens coming together and doing a support and coming together as a whole group for the benefit of our county, I think that's a tremendous message, and I think we can go forward that way and communicate, talk to people. I talked to somebody the other day and she just she didn't have all the facts of something, so I think that's another thing too, is education, conversation, and just talking with people. I think we're doing a good job.
Thanks, Sheila. Bud, do you want to?
I want to make sure that anybody who has something to say and is just busting to say it, this is your chance. Jinx.
I moved here 45 years ago. I was delighted to have Sarah, who's probably the newest person in the room, to say something I've watched for 45 years, which is if we change anything, Walmart comes next week. Now, first off, that assumes you cannot change anything. That doesn't happen because change happens continually. We either choose to guide that change or we choose to get run over by it. But somehow we got to address that fear. That if we don't change anything, we can stay the way we are. And that's simply not true. Anytime, and I think Tim's history showed us that. There's been a lot of change over time. But somehow we got to address that fear. I don't know how you do that.
Ron, you had a thought.
What hasn't been addressed is, I think, part of the root of the problem. Probably been 40 years ago, we instituted the 25-acre minimum on property in an effort to save the land. And I think in that period of time, that has been very successful, but there's a price that we're paying, and that is that we have lost the people. Because the people we need, the little folks, the 99% people or whatever, can't live here anymore. And until we take a look at that seriously and say, yeah, we need to adjust this. We need to start making some plan so that people can come back here and live. Because otherwise, I mean, we're all going to go and be gone, and yeah, the land's still going to be here, but nobody else will.
Amen.
Can I have a comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm not a farmer. I'm not a business person. I'm a commuter. So the thing that I have not heard here at all today is affordability. Well, you all want to talk about marketing and getting your product out there to the market, and that's great. But if it's for me coming back, if I can't afford to buy it, I'm not going to buy it here. I'm coming around through Fairfax or down through Fauquier, and I'm going to go to Giant. I'm going to go to Safeway where I can get stuff that's affordable. $10 for a brat? Come on. Give me a break. That's too expensive for the person who's living out here. The person, you talk about living, but most of you aren't living. You're enjoying life out here. You're at, excuse me, you're at a little bit of a la-la land type thing. The real person who's living here is the one who's trying to make, not so much make a living, but living on a fixed income. The retired individuals. We don't have that extra bit of money that's coming in from something else that we sold or another business that we sold somewhere else and came in here. I've been here almost 30 years in the county now, and I run up and down that road every day. I don't have a problem. That was my choice. I live out here because I like the dark skies, I like the open lands, I like the access to the park, and I like being left alone. I like my privacy. I don't need somebody coming in and telling me everything that we already knew. That there was no internet, that businesses are bad, the youth can't afford to live out here, and tell us the solutions. I understand this is the process to begin the talk, to start getting that, but that needs to be made a little bit more transparent to the people who live here so they don't have those fears that they're worried about you coming in here to change things around. That's what the people that I know are really worried about, because they don't know what's going on. And that's why they're not here. That's why there aren't pickup trucks out there. Thanks.
Can we get your name?
I don't want to go on far.
I mean, isn't that one of the problems? The $10 brat, nobody wants to say.
Patrick Stark.
I'm sorry?
Patrick Stark.
S-T-A-R-K.
Stark Rating Mag, yes.
And this lovely lady you're next to, Debbie Kaiser. Good to see you again.
Randy.
Yeah, just one last point. Everyone always hears about the been here's, come here's, and one thing to remember about that is that even the come here's, what they want the place to be like is what it was the day they arrived. Okay, they don't want any changes going forward. So there's this notion that the come here's are, we want to change things, we want to make all these improvements. No, that's not what I've heard. I mean, some do, but a lot of them are just like, the day I got here, and as soon as there's a stoplight, I'm out of here. So it's oversimplified. The tensions within the community, and I think someone made a very good point. I thought it was a very good point to me that some of the people who are most resistant to providing more opportunities to farmers, whether it's events on their land or whatever it might be, are the people who have moved here recently who said, I don't want noise next door. So in essence, they're taking away opportunities from farmers to sustain their lives here. And so, it's not like one is good and one is bad. It's much more complex than that. And I think that it's important to understand that there are real needs that the farmers have, and that people have to be open to understanding those needs and what that means. If you want to say, I want to maintain all this pasture land and all these farms, well, there have to be some sacrifices with that, or there has to be some tolerance for what that might entail.
And I would just say that the been here's, come here's, the fear of outsiders is not explicit to Rappahannock. Other counties deal with this, and they find ways around it. I think being open, having those conversations is instrumental in getting beyond that labeling.
But Patrick, you make a very good point. Not only affordability, and is it very expensive here, but your dollar here is worth 80 cents. So you're screwed twice, to be quite frank.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a little housekeeping before we say grace on this. I thought this was a fabulous couple hours, and I thank everyone for showing up. We handed out an evaluation form, and we sure would like to get your thoughts about that. This is how we're going to try to improve our process. One way we have improved our process is listening. People bitched at us because we set it up on 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Well, we heard that, and now we've got another session midweek, 5:30 to 7:30, and it's at a bar, okay? So open your wallets and come and buy a brew and join this conversation, because there's plenty to chew on here. Beverly's done a nice job of capturing these key points. We have leadership demonstrated over and over again. They're willing to keep going with this expanded conversation. And I leave this conversation personally quite enthused that we've touched some nerves and made some points in this 4-part series that I hope people will take away and incorporate in their lives in Rappahannock County. That's my